Here's a short, punchy hook you can use. Tired of stubborn belly fat? What if I told you you can see results in just minutes a day? It's curiosity-driven, immediately identifies the pain point, and promises a quick payoff. Perfect for YouTube shorts or long-form intros. If you want, I can give 3, 5 more alternate hooks. They're just as powerful but slightly different in tone. Do you want me to do that? The morning light slanted through the blinds, casting thin stripes across the bathroom floor. He stood in front of the mirror, towel draped loosely around his waist, and for the first time in weeks, really looked at himself. The reflection staring back wasn't the version he remembered. The stomach that used to feel flat now carried a softness he couldn't ignore. His fingers traced the curve absent-mindedly, pressing lightly against the resistance of stubborn fat. It was a small gesture, but it carried weight, a quiet acknowledgement that something had to change. He sighed, the sound caught in the back of his throat as his eyes traveled across his frame. His shoulders slumped slightly, a habitual gesture of weariness more than defeat. The tightness in his shirts, the way his jeans hugged uncomfortably, all little reminders that time hadn't paused, and neither had the choices he'd made. Yet beneath the surface of frustration, a flicker of resolve sparked. He wanted more than a fleeting change. He wanted control, discipline, a version of himself that reflected the effort he was willing to invest. Every movement in the room seemed amplified. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, feeling the tension in his calves, the subtle engagement of his core. The cool tile pressed against his toes, grounding him in the present. He exhaled slowly, noticing the rhythm of his heartbeat, steady, insistent, reminding him that he had energy yet untapped, waiting for focus. The reflection didn't just show his current shape. It whispered possibilities, challenges, and a quiet promise that he could do better. He crouched to pick up a pair of dumbbells, abandoned weeks ago, and held them loosely in his hands. The weight felt familiar but foreign at the same time, a reminder of past efforts that had fizzled. His fingers wrapped around the metal, fingertips brushing lightly over the cold surface, and a small surge of motivation rippled through him. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the water heater and the distant chirp of a morning bird outside. In that quiet, his thoughts sharpened. No gimmicks, no overcomplicated routines, just a simple, focused approach that he could commit to consistently. He ran a hand through his hair, brushing damp strands from his forehead, and caught his gaze again in the mirror. There was a mix of vulnerability and quiet determination in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement that the journey wouldn't be easy, but it would be worth it. The soft curve of his stomach was more than a physical barrier. It was a challenge he was ready to face. For the first time that morning, he smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of satisfaction. Not because the change had happened yet, but because the decision had. He stepped back, dropped the towel carefully onto the counter, and felt the air differently, lighter, charged, full of potential. This moment, fleeting and ordinary to anyone else, marked the beginning of something deliberate, a promise to himself that the effort he put in now would shape the man he wanted to become tomorrow. And just like that, the quiet realization solidified. No more excuses. It was time to take the first step toward transformation. The day after that quiet morning of realization, he woke up with a lingering sense of purpose. The sunlight spilled lazily across the bedroom floor, warm and golden, but it was the internal light that mattered more, the spark of determination flickering steadily in his chest. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be effortless, yet for the first time in months, doubt felt secondary to action. The mirror had shown him what needed changing, but motivation was what would carry him forward. He sank onto the edge of the bed, phone in hand, headphones in place, scrolling through endless videos and articles promising quick fixes. Each one claimed the ultimate result in impossibly short spans of time, but he had learned the hard way that gimmicks rarely lasted. He paused on a simple routine. No equipment, minimal steps, just consistent daily effort. His fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, then tapped play. The movement felt decisive, deliberate, a small but meaningful commitment to himself. The music started softly in his ears, a rhythmic pulse that matched his heartbeat. He leaned back slightly, eyes closing, letting the sound wash over him as he imagined the process ahead. Each exercise seemed approachable, each motion manageable. He could already feel his muscles awaken, even in anticipation. The promise of progress wasn't a distant fantasy. It was tangible, measurable, something he could touch and shape with his own hands. He swung his legs to the floor, feeling the cool carpet under his feet, and stood slowly, awareness sharpening with each motion. The room smelled faintly of coffee from the kitchen, a mundane scent made somehow motivating by the focus it accompanied. He lifted his arms, stretched over his head, feeling the subtle pull along his core and shoulders. That pull wasn't discomfort. It was the signal that his body remembered movement, that the effort he had neglected could be reclaimed. As he watched the video, following the movements meticulously, he felt a rising sense of connection to the person he wanted to become. Each crunch, each plank, each twist of the torso wasn't just an exercise. It was an assertion of control, a statement to himself that he was capable of discipline. His heartbeat quickened, palms slightly damp, but the exhilaration was sweet, almost addictive. It wasn't vanity driving him. It was self-respect, a desire to inhabit a body that reflected intention rather than complacency. He glanced in the mirror, catching the faint outline of engagement in his muscles, subtle yet encouraging. A small smile tugged at his lips, involuntary and genuine. Motivation, he realized, wasn't just a fleeting spark. It was something cultivated by clarity and focus. Every choice, every repetition, every mindful breath contributed to it. And in that moment, he understood. Consistency would be his secret weapon, simplicity his ally. By the time the video ended, he was breathing a little heavier, clothes damp with the first signs of effort. Yet he felt lighter, energized, a quiet pride settling in his chest. It wasn't about instant results. It was about building a foundation, planting seeds that would grow stronger with each day. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was chasing change. He felt like he was becoming it. And as he reached to pause the video, a subtle, almost imperceptible excitement lingered in his fingertips, in his stance, in the way his eyes met the mirror. He was ready. This was no longer about regret or what could have been. It was about action, about movement, about progress. And for the first time in a long while, he truly believed he could follow through. The moment had arrived. The day he would finally translate motivation into movement. He rolled out the yoga mat across the living room floor, its familiar texture slightly worn under his palms, and knelt down, feeling the cool fabric against his skin. The morning sun streamed through the window, brushing his arms and legs with warmth, but all he could focus on was the rhythm of his own breathing and the subtle tension in his muscles as he prepared for the first set. He started with a few basic crunches, deliberately slow, hands lightly touching the sides of his head. Each lift brought a small burn, a reminder that his body hadn't done this in a while. The abdominal muscles protested softly, but there was something satisfying about it, a signal that effort was real, tangible, unavoidable. His eyes flicked to the mirror across the room, catching the faint reflection of a man determined, yet hesitant, shoulders trembling slightly with exertion, face flushed with focus. Next came a planks. He positioned himself carefully, forearms pressed firmly into the mat, heels stretching back. The core engaged instantly, the familiar tremor running through his stomach. He gritted his teeth slightly, feeling the subtle vibration in his arms and shoulders, aware of every inch of tension traveling through his body. Minutes stretched longer than he expected, each second a tiny battle against fatigue. His breath was shallow, controlled, echoing softly in the quiet room, a private rhythm that connected effort to awareness. The simple movements of leg raises followed, each repetition demanding attention and control. Fingers brushed the mat for support, toes flexing against the floor, stomach muscles lifting him carefully. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, damp strands clinging lightly to his temples. He ran a hand across his face, wiping away moisture, and felt a surge of both challenge and accomplishment. This was him confronting discomfort head-on, proving to himself that he could endure it. Despite the burn, despite the fatigue, there was a strange intimacy in the struggle. Every tremor of his muscles, every heartbeat hammering against his ribcage, was a reminder that his body was capable of more than he had given it credit for. He caught his reflection again and smiled faintly, almost incredulously. This wasn't just exercise. It was a conversation with himself, a recognition that change required patience, persistence, and respect for the process. By the time the first session ended, he was breathing heavier than expected, arms slightly trembling as he lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the mat. A thin layer of sweat coated his skin, a warm, satisfying sheen that marked effort, not discomfort. His hands lingered on his stomach, tracing the outline of the muscles beneath, feeling the subtle resistance and responding to it with quiet pride. The mirror reflected a man tired, yet undeniably alive, the first tangible proof that his intention was translating into action. He leaned back on his hands, eyes closing briefly, soaking in the sensations, the heat of his own exertion, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the soft echo of self-belief settling into place. The journey had begun in earnest. He knew tomorrow would be harder. The day after that might test his resolve further. But for this moment, he allowed himself to savor the small victory. The first effort was done. The first step had been taken. And as he rose, stretching his arms over his head, he realized that transformation didn't come from giant leaps. It came from simple, deliberate, persistent action, repeated day after day.